Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and today I'm going to talk about more of the books that I read in May. You may notice that I do not look like myself from the thumbnail of this video. That's because I am filming the intro of this again later today. I decided to cut out what I said about the complete Cosmicomics at the beginning of the video and put it in its own video because it's like 8.5 minutes long. I didn't want to cut any of it, so you kind of get two videos today. But anyway, onwards with the second book that I talked about originally, like hours ago. Then I'll briefly mention that I reread Ninefox Gambit by Yoon Ha Lee, and I loved it even more the second time around, most likely because I was really able to focus on all the little details and understanding the plot a lot better this time, whereas the first time I was reading it, I was just really working hard to understand the basics of the world and just how things worked. This time, I picked up on a lot more of the foreshadowing, the key plot points, little things that people say, and a lot more of the humor. Like, I just did not remember how early the Kel jokes started. They start pretty early in Ninefox Gambit. So this reread was really great. It really reinforced my belief that this is a really good book. Like, I consumed it so quickly the first time around. This time I was able to dwell a bit more on what I just really liked and what I thought made it a strong story. I'm in the middle of rereading Raven Stratagem now, and I will be getting my hands on the third and final book, Revenant Gun, sometime in June, and I'm really looking forward to it. Then I read the new Vorkosigan novella by Lois McMaster Bujold, which is called The Flowers of Vash Noi. I've already done a full review of this if you're interested in it. It is kind of spoilery because this story takes place quite late in the chronology of the Vorkosigan saga, so it's definitely a story for long-time readers of the series, not a place to jump in first by any means. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very rewarding as a longtime reader. The main character is a Cateran and she's one of my favorites, absolutely. And this story also revisits some of the things that really make the Vorkosigan family wonderful and make the whole series wonderful. It's really about the Vorkosigan family's responsibility towards the people who live on their lands, especially the portion of their lands that is radioactive after a war. There's nothing highly original in this story, which is probably the only slightly neutral thing I can say about it, but it is very good as it is. It's very strongly written, and the characters are wonderful, of course. I loved it. After that, I read another novella, which is How to Marry a Werewolf by Gail Carriger. I feel like I have enough to say about this. I should probably put it in a separate review video, so I think I've just committed myself to actually doing that. This is the newest story in her Parasol universe, which is the universe where she set her Parasol Protectorate and Custard Protocol series, as well as some other novellas and such. So How to Marry a Werewolf is the first novella in a projected series of novellas about the romances and happily ever afters of secondary characters in this world. This one focuses on Major Channing of the Chesterfield Channings, who is one of the characters that everybody loves to hate in the series. I was very intrigued about how this story might redeem him, or like how it's gonna make the reader care about Channing falling in love, because he's kind of despicable sometimes. And it partially succeeded, but there are also some reservations I have about it. I think there are just some aspects of the romance in this that weren't my particular cup of tea, but yeah, I'll do a separate review on that one. Murder is Bad Manners by Robin Stevens, also known under the title of Murder Most Unladylike. I really don't know why books get retitled so drastically in different markets. It's really confusing. This is the first book in a middle grade mystery series. In the US, it's known as the Wells and Wong series, I think. And it is about two young girls, Daisy Wells and Hazel Wong, at boarding school in England in the 1930s. They form a detective club and they start investigating mysteries. In this one, Hazel discovers the freshly dead body of one of their teachers, Miss Bell, and then they have to solve the murder when most people don't even realize a murder has happened. And of course they suspect all of their teachers initially. This was a perfectly ordinary middle grade historical mystery. I thought it was very average. There actually wasn't anything super exciting about it, and I didn't really like Daisy that much. Daisy is kind of the seemingly perfect English girl, blonde, blue-eyed, good at sports like lacrosse, and she's got a bit of an attitude. Some of it is pretense, like she actually puts on that facade for a reason. Underneath, she's much more complicated. Now, Hazel is Chinese. She's from Hong Kong, and she's been sent to an English boarding school by her father, who, it's kind of a status symbol type of thing, I guess. So, as unlikely as it seems at first, they do become friends, but I feel like this friendship is a bit fraught. There's a little bit of the racism and prejudice elements in the story. Daisy is a little bit unlikable. Just some of the things she does, especially I think like some of the hazing rituals that she participates in when Hazel shows up, you know, for her, it leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth. My feelings on this book are very lukewarm. The setting was okay, the characters were okay, the plot was okay, the writing was okay, it was average. I'm gonna give the second book a chance as well. I just feel like maybe I need to get over the hump with the debut novel, and the second book might come into its own a bit more. The series might know a bit more what it wants to be, how it wants to be distinctive and everything. So I'll give it another shot, just for fun. Next up is Semiosis by Sue Burke, which I think was just my type of science fiction. I loved this book very much. I probably also read it at the right time, but just everything about it clicked with me while I was reading it. I am gonna do a separate review on this. It may take a little while because I have to get the book from the library again. I had to return it right after I finished reading it to prevent my library card from being locked, and I had other things to check out, you know? So I don't have all of my review notes in order yet, but I will be talking about this more in the future. Just This had everything I really enjoy. Human colonists showing up on an inhospitable planet, trying to eke out a living, entering into kind of mutually beneficial relationships or parasitical relationships with plant-based alien life. I also really like the way that it was written with these jumps in time from generation to generation of the colonists. It really worked for me. So expect me to talk more about this in the future. If it takes me a while, remind me to get on that because I really do need to do a decent review of this book. Then I continued on with the Russell and Holmes mystery series by Laurie R. King with the 5th book, which is called O Jerusalem. Sad to say, I did not enjoy this book that much. I was surprised at how much it rankled me at parts. I like Mary Russell as a character, and the books are written from her perspective. I like her voice, and I like the style of language that King uses in these books. I think of the style as more scholarly, and I tend to think of Mary more as a scholar than as a detective for the most part, which is a bit weird because I think the whole premise of the series is that, hey, we have a young woman who is intellectually and skill-wise on par with Sherlock Holmes, but she never gets to really act like it. She never gets to really play that role of an equal partner. So I had real issues with the characters and the relationship dynamics in this, but also just with the way it was written. So I'll start with that first. This book, I'm not exactly sure how long it is, but I think it's about 400 pages long. It was too long. It was very heavy on description and setting and explaining all the history and context and just all of this information. It was description heavy and the plot was almost non-existent. I can't even really say that this is a mystery novel. It seemed to lack some of the basic elements of a mystery novel sometimes. And I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand why characters were doing things. I didn't understand what their goal was. I didn't get the deductive reasoning of pretty much anything that mostly Holmes is doing. All the characters are so uncommunicative and so vague about things. Like, I think a lot of them just don't trust each other very much. And then, you know, the end of the story, there's just like, that's it, that's the payoff. But also, most of this book seems to consist of Mary putting up with really aggressively annoying male characters. There are two men in the story, these Arab men who are essentially British spies, I think, but there's also Holmes. I was just really irritated at Holmes for most of the story. He's dragging Mary along and he won't tell her anything. He's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to make you go without sleep for almost 3 days straight. I'm not gonna tell you why or anything. It's just like, he assumes so much, and it was really unpleasant sometimes. I was just waiting for Mary to blow up, to just lose her shiitake at some of these characters at Holmes, at the other two men. There are some scenes where she becomes almost incandescent with rage, but never actually lets it out. And I was just ready for her to turn around and like punch Holmes in the face or something. Like he needed a big wake-up call that he was acting like an ass. And maybe it's that I read this at the wrong time, maybe I wasn't in the right mood, but I genuinely thought that the characters were just kind of awful sometimes. And it didn't help that there was nothing super engaging in the actual plot to distract me from how people were acting. So this one actually gets a bit of a thumbs down from me. I think I rated it at 2 stars. I thought about giving it 3, but no, actually, I just didn't enjoy it enough to even be kind of neutral about it. So that was really disappointing. I am going to continue on with the 6th book at some point. I think it returns to the ongoing chronology of the series at the point where I think Holmes and Russell have a more equitable relationship, but I'm going to wait a little while for O Jerusalem to work its way out of my system first. The last thing that I have to talk about is this little novella called The Strange Bird by Jeff VanderMeer, which is a Bourne story. It's set during the time period of the novel Bourne, and it even shows some of those events and characters from the Strange Bird's perspective. So The Strange Bird is a creation, one of those kind of like modified monstrous creatures like Bourne, like Mord, but she comes from a different place. Rather than being created by the company from the novel, she's created in a different laboratory. After the end of the world scenario stuff happens, she escapes from the laboratory and she has this beacon in her head which is sending her somewhere. She wants to go somewhere, but she's waylaid, she's captured, imprisoned, and then further physically modified in a way that she may never reach her goal. She does eventually come into contact with characters like the Magician and Rachel and Wick from Bourne. I think this did not really click with me because it did not have the emotional resonance with me that Bourne did. For some reason in Bourne, the relationship between Rachel and the creature Bourne really resonated with me. I felt the emotion in that story because it was between characters, you know. This did not have that emotional undercurrent in any way for me, and I was actively turned off by some of the material, which is monstrous behavior, because the modifications to creatures in this world are not just genetic, there's physical butchery, and that's what happens to the Strange Bird. So that content that I didn't really enjoy, and then the lack of emotional tug in the story, means it just didn't work for me that much. I did think the character of the Strange Bird, like what she is and what she's going towards, was interesting. It wasn't enough, and it wasn't satisfying enough at the end. Alright, I think that's everything. I think I'm actually caught up talking about everything I've read in May so far, so I can get back to my usual, less daunting weekly wrap-ups. So do let me know if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts on them that you want to share with me down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back to talk to you again soon, and until then, bye.